Welcome to the deep dive. We're kicking off today with a really powerful observation that came straight from you, our listener. You asked this question that stuck with me. What if a political fix in Ukraine isn't really peace? What if it's just postponing hunger for other countries? It's such a sharp point because it highlights this paradox of global trade, doesn't it? It's connected us, sure, but it's also created what you called the supermarket state problem. Makes nations really, really vulnerable when things go wrong.
That's exactly it. And that's what we're going to get into today. Really unpack these complex geopolitical currents around Ukraine. We'll look at how these peace proposals might shift things globally and, crucially, their direct and pretty alarming impact on food security, especially for those supermarket states.
Right. So our mission today is to sort of peel back the layers on this upcoming U.S.-Russia summit and challenge this idea of a Berlin Wall for Ukraine. What would that even look like? And crucially, understand how the conflict has already hammered Ukraine's ability to grow food. Then we'll try and connect those dots back to the very real worries of countries depending on those food imports. What does a shaky peace actually mean for them?
Okay, let's start with the human reality. This war is now in its fourth year. It's just grim, devastating losses, millions forced from their homes. And despite multiple peace talks, the fighting just grinds on.
Yeah, it really does. And that persistence, that lack of breakthrough, just highlights how badly some kind of diplomatic intervention is needed.
Which brings us to this summit. It's confirmed.
Yes, confirmed. U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. They're scheduled to meet Friday, August 15th, 2025. And the location is interesting, the great state of Alaska.
Alaska.
And it's a big deal because it's Putin's first trip to the U.S. in, a decade? Wow, a decade. But there's a notable empty chair or chairs at this initial meeting, isn't there? Ukrainian President Zelensky, key European allies, they're not part of these first talks, deliberately excluded. What's the strategy there? Why leave them out?
Well, the Russian strategy seems pretty clear. They want to frame this as a, great power negotiation directly between Moscow and Washington, sort of bypassing Kiev and its European backers. It feels a bit like Yalta in 1945. Historically speaking.
Right, deciding fates without the main parties present.
Exactly. The idea seems to be to hammer out terms and then present them to Ukraine as basically a done deal. A fait accompli leaves Kyiv with very little leverage.
And Alaska.
Yeah.
Why Alaska? There must be more to it than just being remote.
Oh, absolutely. What's really fascinating here, the key factor is actually a legal one. Remember the International Criminal Court, the ICC? They issued an arrest warrant for President Putin back in March 2023 for alleged war crimes.
Ah, right, the ICC warrant. I remember that.
So any country that signed their own statute, the treaty that created the ICC, is legally obligated to arrest him if he sets foot there.
But the U.S. didn't sign it.
Precisely. The United States is not a signatory. That makes it one of the very, very few places Putin can actually travel to for this kind of high-level diplomacy without facing immediate arrest. It really narrows down the venue options.
Okay, that makes sense legally. Any other reasons for Alaska?
Well, there are a few other layers. There's the historical connection, Russia selling Alaska to the U.S. back in 1867. It kind of subtly implies this strategic parity. Plus, practically, it gives the U.S. full security control, which is vital for a meeting like this. And maybe, just maybe, there's a nod to shared interests in the Arctic as well.
Okay, so venue decided. What about the actual agenda? What might they discuss? President Trump has mentioned, trading some land.
He has floated that idea, yes. And we have some specifics on Russia's proposal, apparently shared via U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. It seems to be a two-phase plan. Phase 1, an immediate freeze of the current front line. But crucially, it requires Ukrainian troops to withdraw from the rest of Donetsk. This would give Moscow full administrative control over Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea.
Wow, okay. And phase 2?
Phase 2 involves final peace talks between Trump and Putin first, and only later bringing in President Zelensky.
But hang on. Ukraine's constitution flat out prohibits giving up territory. Kyiv's been adamant, no land concessions. That's a fundamental clash, isn't it?
It's the absolute core contradiction. Yeah. And because of that, a formal, lasting peace treaty that ends the war seems very unlikely right now. What's much more probable is a frozen conflict, basically legitimizing Russia's current gains on the ground without any final political resolutions. A pause button, not a stop button.
A pause button. That leads us right back to this idea of a wall in Ukraine, which you, our listener, brought up. You mentioned a non-material wall, which is fascinating. But maybe first, let's quickly look at actual physical walls in history. What can they tell us?
Sure. I mean, the obvious one is the Berlin Wall, right?
Yeah.
Thrown up almost overnight in August 61. Its main job was stopping East Germans from leaving for the West. So it was about containment, yes, but also a huge propaganda symbol of that Cold War divide.
And it worked for a time.
It did contain movement, yes, but it didn't solve the underlying conflict. And it came down because the political will changed fundamentally, not because the wall itself failed physically.
Any other examples?
Oh, yeah. Look at the Korean DMZ, the demilitarized zone,
Yeah.
set up in '53. It's a massive, heavily fortified buffer. It has prevented another large-scale war. But the cost, a decades-long frozen conflict, a constant arms race, and still no formal peace treaty. It's just perpetual stalemate.
Stalemate, not exactly peace.
Not at all. Or think about the Israeli West Bank barrier. Approved in 2002. It deviates hugely from the old 1949 lines, cutting off communities, restricting access to basic stuff. It creates immense hardship, social isolation, deepens resentment.
Or Nicosia in Cyprus.
Exactly. A divided city, a classic frozen conflict, enduring ethnic tensions, instability, psychological scars, often stirred up by outside powers. Walls don't tend to bring lasting peace.
So applying that history to Ukraine, a physical wall just seems completely impractical, right? And maybe undesirable too.
Utterly impractical. I mean, just think about the scale. The current front line is, what, over 1,600 kilometers? Around 1,000 miles?
That's huge compared to Berlin's 155 kilometers.
Exactly. And trying to build that in an active war zone.
Yeah.
With constant shelling, lines everywhere, drone attack, it's almost impossible.
Not to mention the environmental damage.
Right. Disrupting wildlife, migration patterns, and the cost. Ukraine tried a smaller wall project back in 2014. It got bogged down in massive cost overruns, corruption allegations. Billions of hryvnia have vanished.
So a full-scale wall would be trillions?
Astronomical. Economically crippling. And frankly, in today's warfare, with drones, precision missiles, fixed defenses like that can be bypassed pretty easily. It's just a money pit, not a real security solution.
Okay, so physical wall, non-starter. Which brings us back to your really sharp point about the non-material wall, the geopolitical one. You suggested the real divide is already there. A Russian-influenced East, a Western-leaning West.
And what's truly interesting there is how Ukrainian identity itself has evolved, almost in reaction to this. Before 2014, yes, there were complex regional differences, language debates. Some in the East felt closer culturally or politically to Russia.
But the invasion changed that.
Profoundly. Russian aggression since 2014, especially since 2022, has paradoxically forged a stronger, more unified Ukrainian national identity. It's fascinating. There's been a real shift from defining identity by ethnicity or language towards a more civic nationalism based on shared citizenship and resistance.
Do we have data on that?
We do. Look at language use. The percentage of Ukrainians calling Ukrainian their mother tongue jumped dramatically. It was around 57% in 2012, but by 2023, it was up to 82%. That really challenges the old stereotype that Eastern Ukraine just likes dependency on Russia. The opposite seems to have happened.
Wow. And besides this internal shift, there's also a huge international legal wall, isn't there?
Absolutely. There's overwhelming international consensus. The UN, NATO, the EU, almost every country condemns Russia's attempted annexations. Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, they all firmly uphold Ukraine's sovereignty within its 1991 borders.
So that international stance acts like a wall itself.
It does. It's a powerful legal and political barrier preventing any formal recognition of territory taken by force. That principle is baked into international law, like Article 2.4 of the UN Charter.
So what does that mean practically, even with a ceasefire?
It means even if the fighting stops and the lines are frozen, legally, those occupied territories are still Ukrainian. The conflict remains fundamentally unresolved, politically and legally, which guarantees continued instability, continued sanctions. It's not a stable end state.
Especially since Russia's demands haven't softened, have they?
Not at all. Their stated goals for peace are still maximalist. They want international recognition of all the occupied lands as Russian. They want Ukraine to permanently ditch any NATO aspirations. They want sanctions lifted. Putin has even said things like, all of Ukraine is ours. It suggests full subjugation is the goal, not just border adjustments.
So you have this immovable object of Ukrainian sovereignty, backed by international law, meeting the irresistible force of Russia's ambitions.
Exactly. That fundamental clash makes any stable, recognized division, even a de facto one, highly, highly unlikely to hold.
Which loops us all the way back to where we started, back to your crucial insight. That dividing Ukraine, freezing the conflict, it feels like postponing hunger. It's not just a clever phrase, it's a tangible consequence, right? A superficial peace doesn't magically restore Ukraine's farms. It leaves those importing nations constantly on edge.
To really grasp that, you need to remember what Ukraine was before the war. Europe's breadbasket wasn't just a nickname, it was reality. They accounted for something like 12% of all calories traded globally.
12%, that's huge.
It is. Sixth biggest wheat exporter, about 9% of global trade. Huge amounts of corn, barley, and especially sunflower oil. They produced almost half the world's sunflower oil exports in 2020 and 21.
And combined with Russia.
Combined with Russia, they were dominant suppliers for huge parts of the world for wheat, barley, corn, sunflower oil, just critical pillars of the global food system.
But the war just shattered that pillar. The damage figures are staggering.
They are. By 2023, estimates were over $28 billion in agricultural losses, direct and indirect.
And harvest plummeted.
Dramatically. In 2022 alone, wheat down by a third, sunflower down 32%, barley down 31%. And this isn't just, a bad harvest year. It's systemic damage.
Yeah.
We're talking millions of hectares of farmland, unusable, unharvested crops riddled with mines, unexploded bombs.
Plus destroyed equipment, storage silos.
Exactly. Destroyed machinery, grain elevators turned to rubble. And the export routes. Before the war, almost everything, like 98%, went through the Black Sea ports.
Which are now blocked or heavily damaged.
Right, so it's not just a pause in production. It's a long-term degradation of Ukraine's entire agricultural capacity. The ripple effects are immense and lasting.
And those ripples hit the supermarket states hardest, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region.
Yeah, the MENA region has this structural vulnerability. It's largely arid, severe water scarcity is the norm. 11 of the world's 17 most water-stressed countries are there.
So they have to import food.
Massively. The supermarket label fits perfectly. The Gulf Cooperation Council countries, the GCC, import around 85% of the food they consume. 85%. The wider Arab world, over half of its basic food needs are imported. If you look at specific staples, grains, they only produce about 38% of what they need. Wheat, 35%, edible oils, 34%.
And their reliance on Ukraine and Russia specifically was huge.
Critically high. Egypt got 86% of its wheat imports from those two countries. Lebanon, 96%. Across the Arab world, it was about 50% of all wheat imports, just enormous dependence.
So when the war hit, prices went crazy.
Through the roof. Global food prices were already rising, but the war threw fuel on the fire. Prices jumped another 20–30% globally since 2022.
And in MENA?
It compounded existing problems. They already had inflation around 15% in 2021. The invasion added another 34% jump specifically to food prices.
Can you give some specific examples?
Sure. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, their food price index, leaped 12.6% in a single month after the invasion. Wheat futures on the markets spiked over 50%. On the ground, cooking oil in Yemen went up 36%. Wheat flour in Lebanon shot up 47%. These aren't abstract numbers. This is hitting families directly in the wallet, hard.
Which makes food security not just an economic issue, but a national security one for these governments.
Absolutely. It's explicitly a national security priority. There is a direct, proven link between governments being unable to ensure affordable, accessible food and triggering social unrest, political instability.
We've seen it before.
We have. Think back to the Arab Spring. Food prices were a major factor. More recently, protests in places like Iran and Sudan have been directly fueled by the cost of bread and other basics. If people can't afford to eat, stability collapses. And it makes these countries vulnerable. Food supplies can be weaponized, used as geopolitical leverage.
So postponing hunger means these states are just constantly managing crisis.
Pretty much. They're stuck in this precarious situation. Wealthier states like the GCC use their oil money to absorb the price shocks, subsidize food, but that's just papering over the cracks. It doesn't fix the fundamental fragility of their food systems. It drains resources, and ultimately it undermines their long-term sovereignty and, frankly, their dignity.
Okay, so that's the stark reality. If a frozen conflict isn't a real solution, what does sustainable peace and recovery look like for Ukraine? And how can these supermarket states build real resilience?
Well, Ukraine has its own clear vision for peace. President Zelensky laid it out in his 10-point peace plan. And it's crucial to note, this isn't just about stopping the fighting. It's presented as a precondition for ending the war properly.
What are the key points?
It covers a lot. Restoration territory back to the 1991 borders, real security guarantees for Ukraine, full withdrawal of Russian troops, justice for war crimes accountability, plus environmental protection, energy security, and critically ensuring food security by protecting Ukraine's grain exports. It's comprehensive.
And rebuilding Ukraine's farming power. What would that involve? Assuming there's real peace, of course.
The potential is huge, but yeah, durable peace is the absolute key. Without security and clear sovereign control over land and ports, investment won't flow.
But if peace holds,
Then it's about massive reconstruction. Restoring irrigation, storage facilities, transport links, the enormous, dangerous task of demining millions of hectares of farmland, providing financial aid to get farmers back on their feet, helping them diversify what they export, and integrating more closely with the EU's agricultural system. It's a generational project.
and for the MENA countries, those supermarket states, what are their pathways to becoming less vulnerable?
There are several key strategies they need to pursue, ideally simultaneously. First is diversification. Seriously. That means actively seeking out new trade partners, new supply sources, so they're not overly reliant on just one or two countries.
So new trade deals.
Yes, and also actively working to secure the trade routes themselves, like the Red Sea, and try not to get caught in the crossfire of these great power competitions. Easier said than done, of course.
What else?
Second, local innovation. Investing heavily in agricultural technology that actually works in their climate. Things like hydroponics, vertical farming, using desalinated water for farming.
But those are energy intensive, right?
They are. Which is why it's critical to pair these investments with renewable energy development. Otherwise, you're just trading one dependency food imports for another fossil fuel imports for energy.
Yeah.
But it can be done. Look at Kuwait. They've achieved really high self-sufficiency in vegetables using vertical farms. It shows the potential.
Okay, diversification, innovation. What else?
Third, regional cooperation. Working together is vital. Joint projects on things like water management, sharing desalination expertise, creating unified food policies through bodies like the Arab League, and crucially, building up strategic food reserves collectively as a region to buffer against global price shocks or supply disruptions. Turn individual weaknesses into shared strength.
Makes sense. And finally,
Proactive diplomacy. In this messy, multipolar world, they need really sophisticated, agile diplomacy, balancing relationships with the U.S., Russia, China, other powers, playing all sides, essentially, to secure their vital interests, food, energy, without becoming pawns or collateral damage in bigger geopolitical games. It's a tightrope walk.
so pulling it all together then, this idea of just dividing Ukraine or accepting a frozen conflict, it really does seem like a superficial fix. It's postponing hunger, like you said. It doesn't heal the wounds in Ukraine, leaves its farms broken, and keeps importer nations trapped in this cycle of vulnerability. It solves nothing long term.
Exactly. Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to chew on. If our interconnected global trade system has led us to this point where a distant war can threaten the basic survival of entire nations, these supermarket states, then what fundamental changes do we need? What shifts are required in how we think about peace, about sovereignty, about managing resources, to actually move beyond just postponing hunger and build a world that's truly stable, resilient, and genuinely well-fed?